my. Woo. Oh. It's cold out there. Oh, why don't you come in and sit down by the fire and keep warm? Oh, my goodness. Well, hello there. It's me, Stephen Schleicher from Majorspoilers.com, and this is our not quite end of the year podcast for Major Spoilers, for the Major Spoilers podcast. I wanted to try something a little different. Maybe you'll like it. Maybe you won't like it. A little bit of old, a little bit of new, and a little bit of really old traditions this week. So it's kind of become a known thing maybe in the last decade or so, but it was lost to the ages, probably around the 1920s when capitalism realized that the holidays could be marketed for monies. It used to be a very grand tradition, especially in Europe, to tell ghost stories on Christmas Eve. We are, as of this recording, just past the longest night of the year, and now the days are growing a little bit longer, but on the darkest night of the year, you would throw the Yule log on the fire and you would sit around and tell ghost story. So this week on the show, some spooky time stuff. But before we get to that, I just wanted to say that I loved that Superman trailer. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, it looks too bright and colored and doesn't look grim. And the Superman's not a grim and gritty character. I mean, he's certainly portrayed that way in a lot of other media, and certainly in comic books. He's portrayed in a number of different ways. In fact, in Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, Superman is portrayed as a tool of the Reagan-era government, which is, maybe not such a good thing. But when you look at comics and properties from like Mark Waid, for example, with World's Finest, when you look and see what Grant Morrison did with All-Star Superman, when you just look at the number of really, more often than not, Superman is portrayed as an upbeat, positive character, even in the face of extreme stress, extreme danger, and I think that, from what I saw in this trailer, that it looked really good. And yes, Superman is very down. Certainly, if we look at the creation of art as a reflection of our surroundings and of our current environment, then certainly there are a lot of elements in that trailer that seem reflective of today's world. And some people don't like it, and that's fine. But I think it's going to be okay. Remember, James Gunn did 3 Guardians of the Galaxies movies. He's done Peacemaker and has written the second season of Peacemaker, which for DC fans are over the moon on how good Peacemaker was, as well as Creature Commandos, the animated series, which is technically the first installment of the James Gunn era of DC, especially in media, not comic book. But everybody is having nothing but good things to say about that as well. I think the actor playing Superman looks great in this. I think Lois and Jimmy and Harry are fine. I mean, you're looking for the best actors for the job, and I think they've found some really good actors in these people. And a lot of people are like, no, bring us back Henry Cavill. Henry Cavill's contract is over. They've basically said we're not going to renew that contract. And I know Henry Cavill was kind of promised that he would continue to be Superman, and then they yanked that rug out from underneath him. So I can understand some people being upset and frustrated about that. But I'm willing to give anybody who wants to put on the cape and tights of Superman a chance to bring their take of that character to the big screen. And I think we should all be willing to do that as well. Let's just wait and see how the movie plays. I really got the feels in the movie trailer. It felt like a comic book brought to life, at least with the bright colors. If you think about comic books in the 4-color origin, and you think of the bright colors that are often portrayed in comic books, I think that comes across very well here. And of course, there's Crypto. I have a little bit of a happy spot. I think a lot of people do after seeing Crypto's appearance, mainly because this year in October, we had a new dog join our family. And even though she's not named after Crypto or any other DC character, Gwen Stacy has been a very nice addition to our home, and she's quickly growing in size and food and rambunctiousness and all the things that come with being a dog parent. So I'm excited for this. I have not been in the movie theater since Wolverine and Deadpool. I don't know if there is anything coming up before summertime that has me wanting to go back into the theater. And so I think I'm probably, the next time I go into the theater will probably be Superman. What did you think of the trailer? You can join our Discord over at the Discord server that we have. There is a link in the show notes, and you can join for free. Don't worry about that. A lot of really cool people over there, especially in the movie channel, where people have been sharing their thoughts and reactions to the Superman trailer. And so you can share your thoughts and reactions there as well. What did you love? What didn't you love? Is this going to be a good one? It might be. We'll have to wait and see. When I was a wee lad, I don't know when, I don't have the date exactly right, but I know it had to have been probably 77, 78. Well, no, it would have had to have been a little bit before that because my sister was born in 76. So it may have been 74, 75, somewhere around there. And I went on my first plane ride with my mother to Alabama to go and visit my aunt, or maybe it was Atlanta. Again, I'm a little kid. I don't have very big memories about anything surrounding this particular event, maybe because this particular event has stuck in my mind for so long. But at one point, it was decided that everybody would go to one of my aunt's friend's house, and then they were all going to go out to dinner or wherever. They were all going to go do something as adults, adult things, right? That's what adults do, as adult things. And that myself, my young self, my cousin, and these kids at this other person's house, we'd be all fine together. One of the kids was old enough, or maybe a couple of the kids were old enough to be babysitters, so 13, 14, 15 aged kids. And a young kid like me, my cousin who's about the same age, she's a little bit younger than me, and another girl or boy who was also about the same age that we were. And very soon after everybody left and all the kids were at home, one of the older kids pulled me aside and said, "Hey, man, don't freak out, but this house is haunted." And I was like, ha, ha, ha. Yeah, very funny. No big, that's really funny, Mr. Strange person who I don't barely know an hour. Yeah, this is all well and good. He's like, no, seriously, this house has got some strange things going on. So if you see some stuff, don't freak out. And I was like, oh, okay. And the evening went on. We had some, hot dogs or something for dinner. Everything was fine. I'm kind of becoming familiar with the house, the front room area where the couch and everything was, the kitchen area that had a very nice bar there, like a kitchen bar you would have where you would have, some stuff on it, salt and pepper shakers, just general spatula type stuff that you would see on the counter between the kitchen area and the main dining area of that household. And so for the most part, we just sat at that bar and had our food. So a bit later on in the evening, I was in the kitchen and they had made some popcorn, and I'm sitting down and eating some popcorn with somebody else. I don't remember I think it was my cousin, now that my memory is starting to become more focused on. Again, this is a memory that's like 50 years old. And I'm sitting there with her and this other girl, and we're all having popcorn and talking. And another one of the older kids comes in, is making sure we're doing okay, blah, 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 blah. And then right out of the corner of my eye on the bar, the salt shaker, one of those, the Tupperware white salt and pepper shakers. You guys may have seen. These are very popular back then. One of these salt shakers just moves, just slides like a foot and a half down the counter. And I freaked the heck out. I guess if I remember it correctly, first we all noticed it moved a little bit, and then it moved a lot. And that's when I freaked out. And I ran into the front room where the couch was, pulling the covers over my head, just screaming, inconsolable. Everyone in the house is freaking out because why is this kid screaming? And then two of the older kids come out and they were like, no, this was all a joke. We were just joking with you. You didn't see, one of the older kids sneak in, go behind the counter, and you didn't see his hand move and grab the salt shaker and move it. You didn't see any of that, right? I mean, that's what was going on. We were just tricking you. And I was like, no, there's a ghost in this house. Ah! And they were trying to convince my cousin, oh, no, it was just you saw us come in, right? And I remember her just kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever. This is okay. But she didn't seem right to me. But then again. And so like an hour or two later, I'm still freaked out when all the grown-ups came home. And I don't remember what happened then. Everyone tried to play it off as a joke. But to this day, I'm pretty sure that a ghost moved that salt and pepper shake. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, that's not too scary. But for a 4 or 5 year old kid, that's pretty scary. I do realize in hindsight that there were things like priming. Hey, this ghost is this house is haunted. I do realize that it was dark. Lights were off, except for in the kitchen where we were eating. It was the 70s, and we're trying to conserve energy like Jimmy Carter told us to do. And so I realized that all of these things were set up. My back was towards a place where someone could have come in behind the counter and moved that salt shaker to freak somebody out. But this seemed a little bit too orchestrated for, hey, there's some kids going to come over and the adults are going to go out. So I still believe that was a ghost sighting. I don't know if that scared you. Still brings back bad memories for me. And there you go. I'm curious, Rodrigo, do you have a supernatural, spooky story that happened to you at some point in your life?
Me personally?
Yeah.
I've had a few things. I have definitely seen some ghosty type things.
Ooh, tell me.
Well, back when I was living in Mexico, we definitely lived in a somewhat haunted house.
Oh?
Just, every once in a while you would like walk down a hallway and you'd see like something was like turning the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And then, if you ran over and looked, there was nothing there, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Like very minor stuff like that. So never any sort of thing that was like really horrifying. Like this is a lot more common, and also a lot of people in Mexico just believe in this stuff a lot more. So
Yeah.
it's the sort of thing where like if you tell people that like there's a ghost in your house, they're like, sure. They're not like they're not gonna make fun of you necessarily, or tell you you're a weirdo. A lot of places are haunted. I had a friend who lived in a like conquest era, like colonial, little like small hacienda type place.
Uh-huh.
And that place was very haunted. It was the sort of thing where like you would you just be sitting there, and obviously this was a long time ago. Just be sitting there, and all of a sudden like the VCR would turn on and like a video would pop out, like whatever.
Oh yeah, the cassette would pop out of it.
Cassette was in there would like pop out.
Oh yeah.
And things like, like hear that the water's running somewhere, so you go over there and you shut it down. You just close the tap or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Walk away, hear it again, walk over, and it's not that it's dripping; it's that something opened the water again. Just kind of like constant, ongoing stuff like that. Plus, just like seeing like catching glimpses of things at night, that
Hmm.
sort of thing.
Now, what was your grandmother's reaction to you guys living in a haunted house?
She was again, she wasn't too perturbed by it. I think there's a higher tolerance for that sort of thing in Mexico. I
Nice.
think partially because there's still like mediums and witches and stuff that are like somewhat accepted by society, at least, back in the uh, late 80s, early 90s.
Hmm.
Um, so never, she never seemed like too upset about it, other than like every once in a while you'd like hear somebody gasp, like you'd hear a gasp, like, what is it? It's like, oh, I thought I saw somebody,
Oh, okay.
right? Or you like
No.
at
So,
least once, it's like that thing where like um you like my grandma would be talking, and like I'd
hmm.
like look around the corner, I'm like, who are you talking to? And she'd like look over and she's like, oh, I like literally a child walked in here and I thought it was you.
Ah, okay.
I was like, no, that I wasn't in here. And she's like, oh, it must have been a ghost, and it probably was. So yeah, not don't really have too many. Like there are some very spooky stories in Mexico, but it was always kind of like just like a higher supernatural radiation
Hmm.
rather than, big spooky moments.
So, your family, especially your grandmother, since she was talking to some child she thought was you,
Hmm.
did she ever just say, "Oh, your uncle came in and I was talking to them"? I mean, a relative of some kind came in to talk, or did she talk back to who she thought was ghosts if she didn't know who they were, or anything like that? Like, "Oh, shush you! I don't need to hear your nonsense now," or "Go away!
Okay,
I'm trying to cook."
so that's a separate thing. My grandma had, you know,
Oh, she had the
the
power.
shinning. Yeah,
Oh,
she did. And actually, both of my grandmothers were at some point mediums of some kind.
uh huh.
Um, and my grandma passed it on to my mom, and we've suspected that my mom passed it on to me.
Nice.
But I I've never had a big manifestation, but like my mom would literally see relatives who would talk to her. Like we like walk in and she'd just be crying and would be like, "What happened?" And she's like, "Oh, like your uncle so and so was here and he was talking to me." Um, and same thing with my grandma. My grandma, um, actually now I don't remember which grandma, but one of them had like did stuff like like tea
Oh, tea
leaves
leaves. Yeah.
readings.
Uh huh.
Yeah. And she quit because she successfully predicted that somebody was going to die.
Ooh, I can understand how that might shake. I know because
Yeah,
we've talked about tulpas and all these things. That's why I was asking if there was any kind
sure.
of that kind of stuff in the family. But that's interesting to know. Also, kind of spooky. As
Yeah.
as
So on my dad's side, my aunt one day like woke up like screaming
uh huh.
that like lots of people were gonna die and that she had a horrible, horrible dream.
Yeah.
And the next day was like the big earthquake from in
Oh,
'85.
yeah.
So, stuff like that, stuff that you can't ever actually like, show any proof of. But yeah, my family's actually full of that stuff.
Have you ever thought maybe your migraines are related to your powers?
So, I that would be a fun origin story. Um,
Like, I mean, I don't know if you believe or not, but I mean, that would be the funny origin story of I rejected all of this stuff as nonsense because I am an educated person. And then you get
yeah,
these migraines and then finally you allow it in and then your migraines go away. But now you talk to dead people.
yeah. Yeah, that would be a fun origin story, but um, if anything, migraines kind of make me more sensitive.
Ah, okay.
So, like it's easy to become overwhelmed with like lights and sounds and stuff like that. I
Mm-hmm.
often get like weird stuff stuck in my head while a migraine is going on, often songs
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So I would imagine that rather than a migraine being like a physical response to me trying to stop a supernatural impulse, that it would actually be like a more sensitive moment, something that could potentially be induced to contact something if that was the sort of thing that could happen.
Interesting. Interesting. Thank you.
Again, I've had
Thank you for
migraines my
sharing.
whole life.
Yeah.
I've had migraines my whole life, and also there was like spooky stuff going on when I was a kid, so they certainly overlapped.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that they're related.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
My wife's family is convinced that my wife also can see things because when she was a little kid, she would just stare up into nothingness, like up at the ceiling or up at the blank spot on the wall, and just stare at that and talk about the lights that were there, even though there were no lights there. And now, and the cats, I think all cats do this. They just stare
Oh
at,
yeah.
these blank spots in the wall or up on the ceiling, and you're like, what the heck are you looking at? To the point where it kind of freaks you out that
Yeah.
are they looking at ghosts? And did they follow my wife around all these years or whatever? And so, yeah, that gets kind of creepy too.
Depends on the cat.
Both of our cats do.
Some of them ginger ones, it's just like,
Yes.
I see you don't have enough of the brain cell right now to do anything.
That would explain Mojo. But when the black cat does it, then you're just like,
Yeah. When the cats that actually have their own brain, you're like, I don't want to go over there. When it's the ginger cats, like, oh. Why are you like this?
So there are a couple of stories for you. I don't know if they were super scary or not, but maybe it is. Let's do this. Let's check out a trade paperback review from all the way back in 2013. It is episode 537, The Chained Coffin and Other Stories. It's Hellboy related, so therefore it's got to be perfect for the holidays. And then I'll come back and share maybe one more strange story. All right, so a couple weeks ago, Rodrigo was like, man, we haven't talked to Hellboy in a long time.
Yeah.
We need to talk to some Hellboy. So we're right around volume 3. This is The Chained Coffin and Other Stories if you're buying it in the trade paperback form. If you have if you've been collecting Dark Horse's comics big library volumes, hardbound ones, we are actually looking at volume 2, The Chained Coffin and the Right-Handed Doom, in that. And that's the one that Zach got to read. This was, I think, Zach, your first introduction to Hellboy as a comic book? In comic book form? Or had you read other...
I've read BPRD.
Well, we did that BPRD volume.
Oh, that's
I've
right,
read
okay.
a couple, and we did Lobster Johnson one time.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But that's not really a Hellboy.
No, I don't think I've actually... I think I might have read like the first issue digitally.
Is this your first omnibus book that you've looked at?
Physically?
Yes.
Physically, yes.
Cool. What'd you think of it?
The library edition?
Yeah.
Oh, it was beautiful. That was so much fun to read and just look at. Like, I'd put it on my desk. I'm like, oh, it looks so pretty. And it would even be open. And then I'd open it.
It's too bad that I have to give it back to
Yeah.
Stephen.
And I wasn't going to bring him over tonight. I was like, maybe I'll just read him again. I was like, man, I'll just bring him back. Too much responsibility in my room.
As far as the art goes, just start there because it's always so wonderful,
Oh, gosh.
Rodrigo.
Oh, yes. I'm a really big fan of Mike Mignola. I'm a big fan of Hellboy, but I think Mike Mignola has actually said, obviously I'm paraphrasing, but he said that the genesis of Hellboy was he wanted to do a book that would have all the stuff he wanted to draw.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic because there's like weird skeletons and little fairy monsters and giant fairy monsters and
Medium fairy monster.
yes, medium-sized fairy monsters and slightly larger than
Floating
medium
heads.
fairy monsters, floating heads, giant
Yaga.
werewolves, Baba Yaga.
Little goblins in the crib.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, little changeling goblins. There's just so much stuff. And because Hellboy
Monkeys.
takes He what now?
A monkey.
Yeah, a monkey.
Yeah.
Because Hellboy, like in Hellboy, all mythology of everywhere is valid. There's just like this huge amount of things that he can do. For example, in this one, we see a lot of like kind of Gaelic mythology, kind of British Isles stuff.
Yeah.
We see some Russian stuff. We see some like not necessarily Russian but Eastern European stuff. We see straight up like Judeo-Christian devil stuff. There's just all kinds of things.
And I just love the starkness in the colors because it's already a darker color palette.
Right.
And then when you mix that in with the just solid shadows that Mignola brings to the book, it just sets everything apart. And it's probably the most eye-catching art that I have ever seen in my life. I mean, I've seen some great art. I mean, there's some great artists out there. But if you were to line up just a bunch of pictures and say, okay, which one stands out at you? The one by Mike Mignola is always going to be that one right there.
And honestly, not to take anything away from other artists, but there are like little like pinup type things in the back, like just stuff by other artists, and like it's just not the same. Like some of them are very cool, but it's really just like you're looking at like another character,
Right.
Because there's like so much of Hellboy is that style.
And that's why I like the artists that they have currently running through the BPRD stuff. Is he's able to get pretty close.
He's got his own style, but it's a very complimentary style.
Right.
That guy actually used to do a lot of stuff for White Wolf, like the World of Darkness
I remember you
games.
telling me about that. Yeah. Matthew, what are your thoughts on the art?
I think that the most striking thing for me is the monochromatic palettes. Everything's kind of browns and blues and purples and dark weird stuff. And then Hellboy shows up and he's this bright red.
Yeah.
And he's the only thing that gets to be, well, in many cases,
Unless there's
red,
something on fire.
But it's the only thing, even the
but
fire
usually
isn't
he's the one
his
who's on
red.
fire.
He is the reddest thing in the book. So you get these weird kind of, like the Baba Yaga story especially feels cold and
because
bleak
it's
and desolate.
very, very
And then,
blue.
Bam! He comes in and he's just this red patch. And even if I can't stand occasionally Mignola's proportions of his body,
Yes.
Yeah.
and I know he's not human, he's not meant to be human, and he's not supposed to carry a human perspective, I get to the point where I'm like, he just looks so cool and so red.
Well,
Yeah.
every because these are a bunch of standalone stories, backup stories, things that were in Dark Horse Presents over the years. Every standalone story has its own color scheme.
Yeah.
So you'll hit the blues, you'll hit the yellows, you'll hit the beige, you hit the homunculus one where it's basically a sandy color throughout.
Yeah.
And then so it just works in that way, and I think it works really, really well. From a, let's see, who hasn't, Zach, you want to talk about art? Since this is your first.
No, yeah, I love his art. What I really like is when he'll go from just like the border edges will be white, and then it'll go super dark, and then he just throws the whole black page background essentially in there, and that just adds a whole lot. It just takes the story into another step down into the darkness.
Another dimension.
Another dimension.
The other thing that I think is great about this volume in particular, if you don't want to get mired down in a really long Hellboy story, and to be honest, I think the first time that I really made I was picking up Hellboy here and there and getting the stuff, but the first time I really made an effort to sit down and just read a bunch of Hellboy, this was the volume that I picked up, because it's like, well, these are all short stories. And the first story, I think, in this volume, if I'm not mistaken, Rodrigo, is the Changeling one.
Yeah.
The one where he's got to get this little goblin out of the house and find out what happened to the real baby child that was stolen.
Oh, I know.
And he's
what
got a
babies
corpse with him.
Yeah.
Babies like iron.
Yeah. Get away from me. It's just, to me, that is, if you want to know what Hellboy is about and what he's supposed to do, this is a perfect example of a Hellboy story, because it's got this bizarre, it's got the weird, it's got the fairy tale, it's got the folklore.
It's got a lot of humor.
It's got a lot of humor in it, and it's got the hero winning in the end. And it's done in like 10 pages or something like that. It's really short. And that's what this whole series is, just a series of really great short stories of Hellboy being Hellboy. Is there one that stands out for you, Zach, that you read?
The first one in the library is the pancakes.
Oh yeah, in
and
the
I
library
thought
edition.
that was awesome.
He
Just
has
2 pages.
eaten the pancakes.
This truly is our darkest hour. I thought that was.
I don't think that one's not in your
No, it's
paperback.
not.
It's not.
Oh, that is a great little short
It's 2
story.
pages. I laughed so hard at
He
the
has
end.
eaten the pancake.
I read something that like somebody was like, somebody was like, hey, Mike Mignola, we need you to do like a 2-page Hellboy story, and he's like, no, I'm not gonna do it. And they were like, no, do a 2-page. And like he wrote this, and he was expecting people to hate it, like on purpose. He was like, this is going to be stupid, and like everybody loves it.
It is.
Like people
It is
come up
great.
to him at conventions, and they're like, that is the best story.
It is.
And it was,
Love
I
the
think,
pancake.
if I'm
Dark
not
Horse
mistaken,
Presents.
it was Dark Horse Presents, and it was like
Yeah.
a little Hellboy volume.
Yeah, that's what they presented it as. They want to do a little Hellboy story.
Yeah.
He said no.
So what else?
Full stories. The Wolves of St. Andrews.
What's
was
that story
really
about?
good. That is the story of the man who comes into the town and it starts with a werewolf eating a bunch of people, and they go back to the history of the town. And
Does it take place in Paris? London?
No,
Oh,
it
okay.
takes place in St. Andrews.
Oh, okay.
But they changed the name because
It's
they didn't want
in the
anyone.
Balkans.
Yeah, they didn't want anyone to know
It's not American Werewolf in London with Hellboy.
It is not.
Oh.
what happened to
It's an American
the royal
Hellboy in the
family.
Balkans.
Rodrigo, what about you? Do you have a favorite in this?
I think I guess I have 2 favorites. The art, I think the werewolf story is the best. That art is just fantastic. But I really, really, really like the very first one. What is it? What's it called? The corpse.
The Corpse, yeah.
Just because it's like that little story has everything.
Mm-hmm.
It has humor, it has weird mythology, and like he doesn't just go through and say, okay, what would you see here, like a fairy knight or something like that. It's like, no, this is like a weird pig monster from Gaelic
Oh,
folklore.
right. And what's really weird, and if you continue to read these books, these characters come back.
Yeah.
And there are repercussions for everything that Hellboy is doing.
In fact, the previous volume talks about stuff that happens in this volume.
Yeah.
In true Mike Mignola Hellboy fashion. All these stories are told out of order.
Right. And that's
So-
probably the one downfall about this book.
Right.
Is that they are told out
Yeah.
of the order, out of a chronological order.
Right. So I think the Iron Shoe story takes place like right after World War II, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like
It felt like they started really far back in time, and then they got closer to modern day, and then at one point when they go through all the really small stories, they like worked way up in years, and then they got to come up with a couple other ones and
Right.
started jumping around.
The story with him shooting out Baba Yaga's eye came out after the story in which we find that Baba Yaga lost an eye,
Right.
which I think is kind of awesome. But, for me, you cannot beat the fight sequence with the werewolf in the Wolves of St. Crispin's, where he's like, only beast. Bet you wish you kept your skin on now, don't you?
yeah.
Hellboy being Hellboy. I don't care if you're a goddamn fish, you're going down.
Yeah.
You love to see those moments because they give him a character distinction that fits his color and, his visual distinction, where everyone else is like, lo, we are werewolf and we have come to eat you. And he's like, I don't care. Shut your hole. It works for me. And I don't necessarily hear the Beast, what's his name? Ron Perlman,
Right.
as the voice of Hellboy. The voice of Hellboy is the same voice in my head as Ben Grimm, which is kind of this Archie Bunker voice over here. Which I
For some
really
reason, I
love.
always heard more of a Germanic voice for Hellboy before.
Like a Schwarzenegger.
not Schwarzenegger,
I
but
bet you
more
wish you had kept your skin on.
Like a Werner Herzog.
but deeper.
Sort of a-
But
perhaps
deeper,
sort of
deeper.
German place, yeah.
But just
I am the
just
Hellboy.
but not thick, just clipped in certain spots. I know that's hard to describe, but it's
I can-
it's a deeper.
I was hearing going like, I'm Hellboy.
Actually, it might be more fun.
Clarity.
Might be more fun to do that.
don't-
I don't give a
don't do
goddamn what
that.
you say.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't put your word you're scared.
Actually, it'd be really great if you were a fish.
Oh, I just threw my bag out of whack.
Be careful, dude.
Oh, I was
Do we need
laughing
to-
so
do we need
hard.
to pause
no,
here?
Actually, I
All
think I
right.
just popped back in with
Okay,
that other
all right.
joke. So
Oh, look at that.
That's what you're getting here at Major Spoilers is chiropractic
Chiropractic.
level humor.
there you go.
She is not my Liebenschlanger Schickerschloss.
Um,
Oh, I entertained myself.
I love the last story, The Box Full of Evil. I thought it was really good because you got a whole lot of weird mythology stuff, but then
Also not in this one.
Yeah, it's not an
a
And
whole
that's
lot of
My
kind of
name's Zach.
Hellboy
and I'm
backstory.
well because I
at the
couldn't
end.
find my paperback version.
Yeah.
I was looking for it on the day that Zach came over to pick it up because I was going to just slip it to him and say, "Here you go," and I couldn't find it anywhere for some reason. When I pulled out the
Maybe
long
with
box,
Scott
there is a divider there that says Hellboy, the chain coffin and other stories. And it's like, there's nothing there. I must have given this to someone. I wonder if I gave it to Rodrigo. No, Rodrigo surely would have bought his own book.
I did. Most of my, you can tell when that most of my collection comes from 2006, I want to say, or something like that. Because half of my Hellboy stuff says, now a major motion picture, Hellboy 2, The Golden Army.
But the one thing I've made a real clear decision on is I'm not buying Hellboy as individual trades anymore, and I'm not buying the Hellboy stuff, Hellboy specifically, in single issues anymore. I'm waiting for these library editions, and I'm just buying those because they are fantastic.
And that's what I'm doing with Fables. I'm only buying the big hardback 2-volume things as they come out.
So for Zach, that was the only thing I had. And I was like, well, as I run down this list, I know all of these stories are in the paperback version. Just take this volume and go and read. And of course, he wanted to read the first volume too. Did you read that?
I read
That had the right hand of doom and
I read The Seed of
Wake
Destruction.
the Devil.
Seed of
So-
the-
And then I
Seed of
started Wake the
Destruction,
Devil, and then I saw there was a footnote that was star thingy, the chain, in the chain coffin. I was like, what is with this freaking order of books? So I
Yeah.
just stopped reading Wake the Devil. I was like, I'm just going to read the chain
Yeah,
coffin.
after this volume, either this one or the next one, it just all goes out of whack. You're okay, here's Hellboy in the 60s. And then it's and then you read that, and then it's here's Hellboy in the 90s.
Have you been buying these library editions on these?
No. Since I
okay.
started buying the regular paperbacks, that's all I've been buying. And I my collection has a random hole in it. I think I don't have volume 5. And then after volume 7, I haven't been picking them up just because I'm poor.
I would like to know what happened to my paperback versions of Hellboy. I really don't know what happened to them.
Paperback Hellboy.
No idea.
Matthew, what is
Did you give them
something
to
that
Scroll Brian? Because
that bastard?
Did you see maybe Rob alphabetized them?
Was he- did Rob still-
because he
maybe he
changed
moved them.
He
Never
hasn't. No,
reviewed?
because these were already alphabetized correctly.
It's 'cause-
Maybe they're under G for Golden Coffin.
I think he alphabetized them, and you were looking for them under HEL, but he alphabetized them under HEC for Heckboy.
Right. That makes
Matthew,
perfect
what is something that's not so great about this volume?
Well, and I'm going to gasp. You guys are going to go, ah! When I say this. I am not necessarily much of a Hellboy guy. I'm not a Hellboy fan per se. And part of the reason why is throughout this volume, these are cool stories. But most of this volume are stories that are cool in and of themselves that have Hellboy in them.
Right.
Some of these, I know a couple of these are actually adapted from old European folk tales.
Right.
Right.
Because I'm familiar with chunks and bits and pieces of these from my history and my study of the European folk tales, which I may or may not have really studied. You'll never know. But when it comes down to it, if you were to take, Jesus,
You said we were going to gasp.
I would say that these stories aren't necessarily stories that have to have Hellboy in them, if that makes any sense.
Right.
Yeah.
This is a volume of supporting material. This is a volume of here's some cool stories, some things that happen. These are chapters in Hellboy's life, but they're not necessarily heavily essential Hellboy chapters. And they're not necessarily the books that I think of when I think, hey, what's the awesomest Hellboy that ever did awesome?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the Baba Yaga story might be, for me, the awesomest Hellboy that ever did awesome. But when you break it down, this is a volume that if you skip it, all you're really going to miss is what, Zach pointed out, the little things that said, this happened in the chained coffin.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You're not necessarily at a point where this is absolutely essential to the history of Hellboy or the Biprid or anything that goes on in here. It's got some nice looking werewolves. I like the werewolves. It's got Mignola-ing all over things. And it's got some good stuff, but the way it's collected makes this volume feel somehow lesser to me than the other volumes we've read before.
If I'm going to have a complaint, it's the same thing. These are some great little standalone stories, but if you were going to skip a volume in the series, this is one you could skip, and you're not really missing out on the grand big story of Hellboy's birth and death.
This is the equivalent trade paperback of the end of the Gilligan's Island theme song, where they get tired of telling you who's on the island and just go end the rest. That's this volume.
Zach, what is there not to like in this?
There is not to like all of the Latin.
Oh, Domini, 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 you're all Catholic now.
Mm-hmm. Besides that, I super enjoyed reading this.
Mm-hmm.
Sectum Sempra.
So there is no negative from me.
Okay, and what about you, Rodrigo?
Probably
That's
also,
okay. That's a valid answer, Zach.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for me, probably nothing, because I enjoy like the big sweeping storyline of Hellboy, but like this book gives Mike Mignola such freedom to just go crazy.
Yeah.
And I really like his art, and I really like the story. And honestly, a lot of the time, I would say that the weakest part about Hellboy is Hellboy, and the fact that he's very relegated in these stories. That he's the central focus, or like he's our point of view character, but he's not the focus of the stories. A lot of the time, actually makes this volume stronger than, say, Seed of Destruction, where it's kind of all about him.
Right. Cool. Right. Anything else, guys? I know we haven't talked a whole great length about this volume, but we've kind of given it to you in a nutshell. We've talked about what we liked and what we don't like. Final recommendation, Rodrigo?
Definitely pick it up. If you're starting your Hellboy collection, this is volume 3, so pick up the 2 first library editions or whatever.
Zach?
Go do it.
Yeah, if you can pick up the library edition or just read the library edition, I strongly recommend it because it's so pretty.
The pages are so big.
The pages are so big, and so the art
you can easily lay down My Trade in the center of the library edition, and there's still a good 2 inches in every direction.
Yeah.
And really, if you just want to see if Hellboy is something for you, if you could just skim this, I think you get a good idea if Hellboy is for you, and you don't have to invest in a whole volume. You could read 2 small stories, I don't really like Hellboy. You didn't waste that much time, so you should. You owe it to yourself to check it out.
And Matthew.
Well, here's the thing: if you were the type of person who was like me, there's always that problem that I have, and I think what it really breaks down to is if I'm going to collect something, I'm probably going to be shelling out a lot of money.
Right.
The main reason that I don't have a complete run of Preacher trades is there's one that annoyed me, and so I don't have it. And if there were one that you could skip in the Hellboy mythos, for lack of a better word, this would be the one. It's a good story. It's a good laying around on a Sunday afternoon in your underpants because it's cold and rainy and you don't want to go out kind of reading story. But it's not your Liebeschlange Schickelschlatz. It's actually something entirely different. So I would say if you know you love Hellboy, check it out. Otherwise, it's a borderline pass for me.
That was a nice trip down memory lane. Before we get out of here, though, this week, I have one more tale, this time one of high strangeness. And it's somewhat fitting because it seems like for the last month or so, New Jersey specifically, but most of the United States has been invaded by flying saucers from another world. Or at least that's what they want to tell you. I moved to Atlanta in 1995, and by 1996, end of 96, I was living way out in the suburbs, which is probably now just a part of the inner city of Atlanta. I used to live way out in Austell, and I used to have to go basically downtown to Buckhead, which is an area just north of downtown. That's where, at the time, there was a lot of shopping. The big mall was out there, those kinds of things. And it would take me anywhere, depending on the day of the week, 45 minutes to an hour, hour and a half to get home, especially on a Friday when everyone is trying to get out of downtown Atlanta and head home. There were some times where I had meetings in Atlanta, in the downtown part of Atlanta, for an organization that I belonged to. And so I would get home really late at night. And so one evening I'm getting home, and it's probably 9 o'clock at night, 9:30, something like that. And I'm driving west, getting out to home. And as I start getting closer to home, I notice a big, bright light kind of appear in the sky. And it appears to be floating there, or it appears to be moving with me. And it's just moving so slowly that surely this couldn't be anything other than some strange light. And as I got closer to home, the light was still there. It's like it hadn't moved, and I knew it wasn't a planet or a star because it was way too bright to be either of those. And instead of turning into my subdivision, I just kept following this thing. I followed this thing. It would go into the trees and come back out, and it would disappear. And then I would look, and then a minute later it would pop up in a different place. And then I would stop and get out of my car to look, and then it would be back in a different place. It was intense because it was just this big white light in the sky, just kind of hanging there or jumping around and doing different things. And I was convinced that I should call the UFO Reporting Center to find out what this was. And then it flew over. After a couple of minutes, it flew over my car. And it was an airplane. Turns out that part of the city is part of the landing path for the, the Hartsfield Airport in Atlanta. And on that particular evening, all the planes coming in were, for whatever reason, turning on their landing lights like many, 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 many miles further out than what they normally do. And as soon as I realized that it was a plane with these bright landing lights, I was like, oh, thank goodness. What a relief. I was really freaked out there for a moment. And then as I turned around and started to head home, I noticed, sure enough, there's this big long line of all of these lights going back. And when I got home and went into the backyard and looked out there, sure enough, you could tell, yeah, these are all planes on their landing approach to the airport with their landing lights on for whatever reason. And sure enough, a couple of days later, maybe it was a day later on the news, they did talk that a lot of people were freaked out by these lights, and that they gave an explanation as to why their landing lights were on. But maybe once or twice a year from then on, I would come home at night, or I'd be going out into the backyard after the sun had gone down, and sure enough, you could see the landing lights. It wasn't often, but once you saw it, you saw it. The last couple of years, I've been getting into astrophotography. And so I've gotten very accustomed to looking up in the night sky and seeing Starlink, which is a sight to see. If you see Starlink fly overhead, it's just this line of blinking lights. It is the weirdest thing that you've seen. I've seen meteors. I've seen satellite re-entry. I have seen airplanes, both large and small, both far away and near, fly over. I have seen regular satellites fly over. And yes, you can see regular satellites fly over your head. I've got an app that will let me know when the International Space Station flies over, and you can go outside and you can literally see the International Space Station fly over your house, and you can wave at all the spacemen that are up there in space, some of them stranded since June. And you can see all the wonders of the universe, all the stars, all the planets. Well, not all the planets, because I still have yet, in my astrophotography, have yet to get a good picture of Uranus. But that's beside the point. I have taken pictures of Jupiter and Saturn and constellations and all of these things. And there's some truly amazing stuff out there in the world. And a lot of the stuff that people are claiming are UFOs are probably drones flying at night, because it is getting close to the holiday season and people are maybe buying some toys for their kids and wanting to check them out. The rule on drones has changed in the last couple of years to where now you can fly drones at night, providing that they have the blinking lights or have some kind of light on them. And of course, you can only fly them at a certain height. So that could be it as well. It could literally be somebody seeing Starlink up in the sky and thinking that it is some giant mothership. I doubt it's swamp gas. I doubt it's the planet Mercury. And really, if you do see a bright light up in the sky and it does appear to be stationary, this time of year right now, Jupiter can be seen very easily between the hours of 10 and really 2 a.m. Venus will show up as well. If you want to know if something that you see in the sky is a planet or a satellite or something like that, there are many applications out there that you can use to see. And one of the ones that I like to use is one called Sky Guide. The other one is Stellarium. Both are really good apps. What's nice about these is if you've got it on your mobile device and your mobile device has, the compass and the gyroscope and everything built in, which most of them do today, you can actually point it at the thing you're looking at and it will tell you, oh no, that's Jupiter, or oh, that's Mars, or oh, that's whatever. And that can bring you a little bit of relief. But here's the thing that I really like about all of this wave of UFO / drones / spy satellites / whatever, is we do get outside and we are looking up, and we are not looking down at our mobile devices or our TVs or in many cases our comic books. And we're getting to enjoy the majesty that is the outside. So if you do get a chance this holiday season, go outside and just look at the sky above. We are at the darkest part of the year, and that means a lot of these things are going to shine really brightly. If you really want to see some cool things with your naked eye or a pair of binoculars, you should be able to see the Andromeda Galaxy with a naked eye. It looks like a smudge. You can see the Seven Sisters constellation. Very visible to the naked eye. Orion, the Orion Nebula, is visible to the naked eye. If you've got a good pair of binoculars, heck, even a good camera with a 250 millimeter lens can let you look at the Orion Nebula in great detail. So get outside and look up, and just remember, a lot of those things that you're seeing this week and into the next that are up in the sky are probably drones, they're probably airplanes, they're probably satellites, and at least one of them just might be Santa Claus. Happy holidays, everyone.
This podcast is copyright 2024 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.